Aê! Quase que a gente perde a entrada desse programa, porque a gente estava discutindo um negócio aqui no backstage desta live que aconteceu comigo e com o David na Coreia, mas a gente não vai entrar nos detalhes aqui hoje, porque não é sobre isso que a gente veio falar. A gente veio falar sobre Shakespeare e teatro na Austrália. E além dos convidados de sempre, que são esse pessoal maluco que faz parte do Shakespeare Brasil, que é a Bianca Muniz e o Fred, que tá aí, Rodrigues, mas ele gosta de ser chamado de Veloso, porque ele gosta de fingir que tem parentesco com o Caetano.
Isso, exatamente.
Nós temos também o nosso convidado, nós temos o nosso convidado especial diretamente da Austrália, lá terça-feira, 9 horas da manhã, David Meadows.
Hello.
Thank you, David, for being here early this morning in Australia to talk about Shakespeare with us.
That's quite all right. Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
I love these presentations, like people like speaking a different language that we are, and you could basically could have said anything, and David would be like, "Oh, thanks for having me." Like,
I know, yeah.
We have this douchebag here.
Exactly.
Like, oh, yeah,
I have no
that's
idea.
me. That's me.
Like those tattoos people get with the Asian characters on it. It's like it
Yeah,
says,
exactly.
you know, look at this
Soup.
dumb idiot. There's wisdom, knowledge. No, it says you're an idiot. That's what it is.
But don't worry, that's not the case.
But David,
I was really
okay. You know, I'll never do that to you, right?
Of course.
Never.
I was just like imagining. So David, we were talking before you come in about this huge enterprise, using a Shakespearean word that you took reading all these like historian plays. And I would like to know why. Why did you do that?
Yes, why?
Why?
Look, basically, I mean, it was a combination of factors. It was we'd already okay. So long story short, we'd started doing the complete works as in-person monthly readings in the foyer lounge at the Alex Theatre here in Melbourne, and it was very informal. It was just a bunch of actors. We'd turn up. Sometimes we wouldn't even rehearse. Sometimes we would. And we would turn up, and every month, on the last Monday of every month, we would do a reading. And I just said, let's do the whole canon. I have never read the whole canon. There are certain plays that I have no idea anything really about. And I thought, what a great way to discover the canon. Let's just get together and read it with a bunch of actor friends. And if people want to come along, they can. And we got a small but devoted following of people who'd sit there with their own complete works and their editions and follow along the script. And we started doing them in chronological order, more or less. So from the start of his career to the end.
Okay.
We're about halfway through now. And at the time that the quarantine came in and COVID-19 forced everyone to stay indoors, we were just about ready to get into the Henriade plays, which is Richard II, Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, and Henry V. And I was going to throw the Merry Wives of Windsor in there as well, because that fits in between Henry IV, part
Henry
2.
IV, yes. Part 2 and Henry
V. And because it's kind of like a comedic spin-off, it's got a lot of the same characters, and it actually does fit chronologically between those two plays. So, and that was going to be what we were going to be doing from April until August. That 5-month bracket was going to be those 5 plays. And we did, Merchant of Venice was the very, very first one we did as a Zoom online virtual piece. And literally as soon as that finished and I logged off, I went, I don't ever want to do these readings in person again. I love this virtual format. And B, once a month isn't going to be enough to keep me entertained and distracted. So what happens if I do it every fortnight? And I worked out that if we did it every 2 weeks, excuse me, there were enough slots left over between the end of the Henriade and the end of August for us to throw in the 4 plays of the Wars of the Roses, which we'd already done because they were among the very, very first plays that he wrote.
Yes.
So I thought, well, we can do the whole cycle of history plays from Richard II through the Henry IVs, Merry Wives, Henry V, the three parts of Henry VI, and Richard III. We can do the whole lot between April and August if we do them every 2 to 3 weeks. So, like a fool, I went, yeah, let's do that. And so that was pretty much all there was to that. And everyone was like, yeah, great, sure. And nobody had anything else to do because we were all in lockdown. So they were like, yeah, cool, done.
Why not?
And therein began the nightmare of trying to schedule rehearsals around, 7 different time zones and
oh my God,
people's work commitments and so on. And it's like, oh, it's 2:30 in the morning in San Francisco, and it's 3:30 in Boise, and it's 6:30 in New York, and it's 7:30 in Sao Paulo, and it's 11 a.m. in London and 12 midday in France.
Oh, Jesus.
And it's 9 p.m. in Melbourne, and 7 p.m. in Perth, and then but it was incredibly worthwhile because I actually had an email the other day from one of the actors, Edgar, who was in the whole cycle and played a fairly sizable role in the Wars of the Roses plays. And he wrote to me and he said, I had never explored those plays, and I'd always kind of seen them as like this kind of black hole in my study of Shakespeare, because I'd never wanted to delve into them because they always just seemed so ominous, or that like they were going to be super boring or something. And it's like, now that whole world has opened up to me. It's like, these are such great plays. And I love the history plays. They're among my favorite of Shakespeare's plays. There's some amazing, amazing drama to be found in them. So yeah, that's how it all sort of came about. And now it's all over and I'm like, oh, back to monthly. Oh, okay. It's actually kind of a relief.
And you guys were like, and you were back
what you
to...
just said.
Sorry. No, please.
No, for what you just said, David, the historical plays, they are not very popular in Australia as well, or no, because in Brazil, we don't do a lot of those historicals. Some of the plays were never performed in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yet. And we don't know if when it's going to be done, and we want to do it, but we don't know because it's something so far from our reality. It's not our history. So it's not something that people would, we don't know if the audience would like to watch it. And I don't know if every single actor would know enough about the War of the Roses and about all those kings and Henrys and Richards to do it. And what about Australia?
Well, I mean, I think obviously where, Australia was a British colony, and so much of our history is tied in, I myself, my sort of ethnic lineage is, there's a little bit of Dutch, but it's predominantly UK. It's Scottish, Irish, English. So most of us white bread Australians are very much British stock, and so much of our political system comes out of the British system. The Queen, Queen Elizabeth II is nominally, at least, our head of state. We're still technically a part of the Commonwealth, even though we're an independent nation. So culturally, it's very much a part of my lineage. But I get what you're saying in terms of like theatrically. Yeah, it's kind of actually not dissimilar to the way the other plays work, the tragedies and the comedies. I mean, I don't think anybody really understands kind of the internal politics of Denmark or how the royal family of Denmark works, but everybody understands the family drama of Hamlet. I don't think too many people know an awful lot about 11th century Britain and the kind of pre-Christian world of something
Scotland,
like or Scotland. But we understand the good versus evil. We understand political intrigue, ambition, revenge, love, death. All those sorts of universal themes. And I think when people do the history plays, and obviously probably the two biggest ones that people do most often are Henry V and Richard III, because they're kind of, Richard III is a story of a psychopathic villain or a sociopathic villain killing his way to the top, and that's, this is a similar kind of enjoyment to be had from that as you would from something like Hannibal or any of these stories about a mass murderer. That film that Zac Efron did about, was it Ted Bundy, I think.
Yeah.
You get a similar kind of insight into the mind of a sociopath and how they function. And Henry V, well, that's just good sort of rah-rah sort of let's go to war and beat the enemy, and there's a sort of this kind of thing going
kind
on.
of make the heart of the English like swell. Henry V, I think.
Yeah,
I think it's made for that. I think somehow. I mean,
it's certainly a very patriotic,
very British, like raising the flag in a way.
Well, exactly, but also,
but I do understand what you're saying. Yeah. Like there are common like feelings.
Absolutely.
In these plays, they're not necessarily connected to we understanding the politics of it. I've seen a lot of Richard III plays here in Brazil, and people get so much worried about to explain, this guy, and there's this family, and this monologue is about this. They stop the play and they do adaptations of the play in order to explain to the people who are watching what's going on, but that's not necessarily what's really going on. What's going on is, like you said, it's a story about a sociopath, a mass murderer, like going his way.
And there are political, there's, especially with these history plays, there are always political things to be said about whatever's going on in the wherever the play is being performed. When I think it was Liev Schreiber played Henry V for the Public Theatre in New York, it was, I think, just after George W. Bush Jr. had been re-elected to his second term, and right in the sort of throes of the Iraq conflict and the second conflict in Iraq. It's sort of 2005, 2006, somewhere around that area. And he made the comment that the parallels between Henry V and somebody like George Bush were clear, in the sense that here's someone who, as a leader, has to prove his mettle to the people by going into war and saying, look at how big and strong I am as a leader. I can command the troops. I can defeat our enemies, and we will prevail, and our way of life will prevail. And the parallels were evident. And you get the same thing in Julius Caesar. There was that infamous production, again, at the Public Theatre, where they dressed Julius Caesar to look like Donald Trump.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
And so those kinds of things, particularly with, I think, the Henry IV play, Henry IV, those kinds of political machinations, it's very easy to kind of dress someone to look like such and such a prominent local politician and say, well, this is an allegory about the corruption or the violence or whatever of this local politician or this local political movement or whatever.
I'm sorry, but if you would, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I just want to like give you, I just want to somehow provoke you to answer something. Yeah, it's like, if you would do a play, if you would like be a director, like to stage a play, like, I don't know, let's say Richard II.
Yep.
Would you be worried in a way to present to the people, to the audience, that this is an allegory? Would you be worried like that? Or you just be like, you know what? These words, they speak for their own. And I don't care if you don't notice the difference between here and reality. I'm just going to do the play as it was written. Would you be worried to the audience like that? Because we are dead worried about audiences. I noticed this here in Brazil, right? We like, oh no, nobody will understand. Nobody. We have to do something in order to make them understand? Do you have this kind of worry as well?
I suppose it would depend on the theatre that I was working in, what sort of promotional mechanisms they had in place, what kind of audience base they had. If I was producing it independently, if I were doing Richard II independently, my personal aesthetic is I'd probably do something that was generic enough that it wasn't necessarily about this or necessarily about that or necessarily about the other thing, but it existed in a world where anyone could really draw their own conclusions, that was presenting the play as neutrally as I possibly could, as ultimately a drama about the people and their interrelationship with one another. And then from that, and there might be the occasional little maybe jokey kind of reference. I'll give you an example. I was in a production of Merchant of Venice, oh goodness, 8 or 9 years ago now. And during the casket, one of the casket scenes where I think it was Prince of Aragon was choosing his casket, the line in the play is when he opens it up, he says, "What do I find here? Oh, the portrait of a blinking idiot." And it's a moment that's ripe for comedy, because you can pull out a mirror and, oh, it's a blinking idiot. I'm the idiot. Or you can make it a political statement. So he pulled out a picture of the then Prime Minister and showed it to the audience. Oh, it's a picture of a blinking idiot. And everyone's like, oh, it's very, very funny. Little things like that you can do. I have no problem playing little jokes like that, unless I don't know that my aesthetic would necessarily want to go for the overkill.
Okay.
This is definitely about our current political situation, or about I wouldn't do, for instance, I wouldn't do Richard III as as an allegory about our current Prime Minister, even though the parallels are pretty obvious. Because I would like to think that, I personally would like to think, and maybe I'm being optimistic, that an audience will get that anyway, without having to kind of say, look, there it is, open wide, and spoon fed it to them. I would hope they would get it anyway. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think this happens in Brazil also because we intend to think that people are going to have some problem with the language, because most of the sorry, today my English is terrible. The majority of the translations here in Brazil try to keep the structure and try to keep the sound of the English, and they are not the regular Portuguese, as the original is not the regular English, And
Yes.
I think we always have this concern, if people are going to understand this kind of Portuguese, or if we have in a way to adapt it. And so I'm curious to know, because I know probably in Australia, you learn Shakespeare like since you are a child in school and everything, or a little bit at least. So I'm curious to know if the audience in Australia is just the same, if they have some issues in understanding like the original language and everything, and if this is a question for you, if this is a problem for playing Shakespeare in Australia.
I think it can be, and it depends on the market you're playing to. I think because we're raised with it in the original language, and because we are a former British colony, and and we've got the British flag on our flag up in the corner, and because, as I said before, it's very much a part of certainly white Australia, it's part of our cultural heritage, European and British culture particularly. I think there's a reluctance to adapt or translate. The occasional word here and there we might change just for clarity's sake. I remember we were doing Twelfth Night a long time ago, and one of the actors, instead of the line was one of Antonio's lines, and he said, "For traffic's sake," to do with the trade between these two nations. He said, "For traffic, it might have been something by repaying what was stolen from them, which for traffic's sake most of our city did." And he changed the line to "which for sake of trade most of our city did." Just little tiny changes like that we do occasionally. And where words have changed their meanings, like luxurious. Luxurious in Shakespeare's time meant the same thing as lecherous or lascivious, whereas now it means, sort of opulent and expensive. So you change a word like that. But I think for the most part, because of the sort of the cultural history of Shakespeare in Australia, translating it is generally not done. Lots of cuts. It's usually fairly heavily cut. But no, not so much. Not so much.
As you
sad.
go ahead, Fred, go ahead.
No, I just think that's sad, a little bit sad because, but in a way, like when I went to England and I had never seen a Shakespearean play at the time. I had never ever. I knew Shakespeare, but I had never seen Shakespeare on the stage. And when I got there, I saw a production of, I believe it was Romeo and Juliet at the Globe. I think it was 2009. It was not a very good production, if I may say so. It was an okay production. And I got out of the theater and I found a friend from my school who happened to be my teacher at the school. He was British. He was a Londoner, if I may say so. And I said, well, you see, I'm from Brazil. I'm learning English now. I live here now. I'm going to be here for 3 months. So maybe with some time, I get to understand this play because I didn't get much. I got like 50, 60%. And he said, well, I got 50%.
Yeah.
And I'm British. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Because in a way, I understood then and I understand now. Even when I got to my school, I learned acting in New York City. And there, I got to an understanding that it has to be done with very good acting. Because I think it's the good acting that actually clears up the understanding of the play. It doesn't matter if you speak English, because I'm going to be speaking Elizabethan English.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different language. And you're going to have some problems if you don't have someone acting those images very with clarity,
Yeah.
and doing differences with that text in order to make it different, in order to paint the text. But when you said something like that, like when you just said it, like, oh, we don't have this kind of problem here. I'm like, oh, well,
oh, look,
damn you Australians.
I'm not saying that people don't walk out doing the same thing as your teacher did and say, I only got 40 or 50% of that. Kenneth Branagh, I remember reading in his autobiography, which he wrote when he was 28.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It's a ridiculous autobiography.
Yes, Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
Who else would do that?
He said,
My God.
He saw Derek Jacobi on stage as Hamlet, and he said he had no idea what a bodkin was or what a fardel was, but he was confident that the actors knew. And as long as the actors knew and they were able to imbue, then he was like, okay, I trust this and I trust you with this language. Even if I'm not picking up all of it, I'm getting the gist. Let's go. And I think that's true wherever you go. I think even it's true for me. I mean, there are certain points where I'm just, particularly if the actors are a bit too kind of generic, there's points where you're just kind of like,
you doze off. Yeah,
you're vaguing out a bit. And
Yeah.
And it's
Exactly.
like, yeah, I don't really understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I want to, but I'm not getting it. I'm getting that you're a bit upset, or you're a bit happy, or you're a bit this, or whatever the sort of general emotional wash is. But I'm not getting the specifics. But then, having said that, I have to say, at a certain point, that's kind of a good thing to have a couple of moments during any show where you're not having to go and be constantly listening and picking up everything. Some things just fly over your head, and that's cool. It's like memories, you know. Sometimes memories are designed to fade. They're designed to become sketchy. It's like, what actually did happen? I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. You remember how you felt, and that's kind of ultimately the point.
Okay.
I think. I mean, you've only got to look at the structure of Shakespeare's plays anyway to see that he understood at a certain point that you needed a comedic break, even in the heaviest of tragedies.
Yes.
At a certain point, here are the rude mechanicals to come out and go, da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, here's some word games. I'm going to throw this word at you, and I'm going to throw it back at you. And playing tennis with the, a set of wits well matched, bang, bang, bang. And then, okay, we've had that little comic break. We're going off now. Back to the tragedy. And everyone needs a little bit of a break. So,
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, it's just the same in Portuguese. We need very good actors. Otherwise, we are completely out, So I agree with Fred.
There's nothing worse than seeing, a bunch of people getting up and going, oh.
And this is exactly what happens here in Brazil most of the times when you speak about Shakespeare. People tend to think that they need to I don't know, to
present them.
Yeah. They need to speak in a certain way to show, and this is not necessary at all. Not even in English, not even in Portuguese.
No, I one of the things I've loved about the history cycle, as we've been doing, is watching the different styles at work and seeing how, the Americans will do, the guys from the US will do their stuff in one very particular kind of way, whereas the British ones will do in their particular kind of way, and the Australians will do it in a particular kind of way. And it's one of the things I love about it. One of the things I love about the IAE, the company that Carol and I are a part of, is that there's so many different nationalities and so many different ways of approaching it. That to me is fascinating, and seeing those sort of bounce off each other. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, it is.
And when we were doing I can't remember which play it was that we were reading, that you invited a lot of French actors to play the French characters, and I was watching it, and I had the feeling that when they were like, because I mean, it's Shakespeare. It's he's English, and he's writing about French people that they hate.
In generally not a very flattering way. Yes.
Not at all.
Yeah. And I noticed that they were like the Frenches. They were like trying so hard to like make their characters like likable, and we are not the villains. We are great,
Yeah.
We are not the villains.
So yeah, we are not the villains. And it was so nice. I was thinking, like, if David invited, I don't know, British people to play those characters, they would probably do it in a different way. They wouldn't take those characters as serious as the French were doing it. They were probably joking about it.
Well, yeah,
and it's not in a mean way. It's just.
Well, no, they would. I think the temptation is to, when you're playing a villain, and particularly, a classic villain in the sense that, that rivalry between the British and the French is, legendary. It's very tempting to kind of just sort of play the Dauphin as, for instance, just as this kind of foppish boy. It's like, oh yes, the English and their dancers and It's so, it's very tempting, and it works, but it also works to play it completely straight. And it was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to get French actors to play those roles, not only because we could, but given that it was an international sort of platform that we were using, but also to get that sense of perspective of like, well, what does it look like with French actors playing French characters who are the villains? What does it look like to have that inherently sympathetic approach to their own portrayal? And can the play withstand that? And it absolutely can. Even Joan Le Pucelle, Joan of Arc in Henry VI Part 1, it still withstood being performed with a measure of sympathy that only a French actor could bring to it. And I really, really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed watching it. There's all kinds of different ways to keep the stuff interesting and fresh. And if the opportunity presents itself, oh my goodness, take it every time.
Yeah, I remember one of my characters.
It also feels great. I was just going to say, plus it also sounds great being done in French,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they generally tend to go with the Victor Hugo translation. Victor Hugo did the translations of
Victor Hugo did it translate. Yeah. That is awesome.
That tends to be kind of the go-to French translation for French actors when they do Shakespeare. So
awesome.
Yeah, it sounded great. Sorry, you were going to say.
But I remember when I was doing one of the characters, the French characters, in one of the scenes, it was me and two other actors, from France. And you were like, you can do a French accent if you want. I was like, no way, because that would be so disrespectful. But at the same time, I was like, maybe I can do that just to be fun. And if they say something about football or Brazil losing the World Cup to France, I would do the accent. Just, my mind was like that. How I can revenge it?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, I have to say that was I kind of admired Paul's lack of, because he just barged in as, he'd already sort of gotten some practice with Dr. Caius previously in Merry Wives of Windsor, but when I put him in there as was it Bourbon? Yeah. Was it Bourbon or Orleans? He was one of the French lords anyway. I can't remember which one he was, whether it was Bourbon or Orleans. But
I was Bourbon.
You were Bourbon. Okay, so he was Orleans. All right, and he was like, yes, I'm doing my best French accent, and all these French actors are sitting there right next to him on the screen, and it was like, man, you got some balls. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So,
but that's the thing about your project.
Say again?
Go ahead.
No,
I was saying that was the thing about your project, because you were inviting actors from different parts of the world to do the historical plays. And for example, me, I didn't know much. I studied a lot about English history to do those plays as well. And I was like, which Richard are we talking about? Who was his father? Who came after him? And it was really, really nice. And now, what are you gonna do now that the historical plays not over, because you haven't done all the historical plays? You haven't done the Henry VIII.
Henry VIII is
Kingdom.
One of the few ones left. Yeah, and we did. I'll tell you what was interesting about, given what you were just saying. One of the plays that we did last year, before we took them online, was a co-written play, because we're doing a couple of the co-written and attributed works as well. So we're doing Sir Thomas More and Two Noble Kinsmen and Double Falsehood right at the very end, which is supposedly the lost Cardenio. But one of the plays we did last year was a play that Shakespeare co-wrote with Thomas Kidd about Edward III. and it was about Edward the Black Prince and the campaign in France that's referenced specifically in Henry V. When they talk about the last time they fought in France, it was Edward the Black Prince. And a couple of the actors were saying it was so great to be able to do Henry V with that play in their recent memory, with the other play in their recent memory. So they were able to tie that in directly to that story. And so part of doing all of them in sequence, that you get the sense of this through line, and especially given that I'd tried as much as possible with only about, I think maybe 3 exceptions throughout the whole cycle, which was remarkable, to have the same actor playing the same character across multiple parts.
My God.
So it was the same Falstaff all the way through. It was the same Hal, Henry V all the way through. It was the same Bolingbroke, Henry IV all the way through all the parts. The same Mistress Quickly. The only roles we had to swap out, the first Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, we had to swap out with a new one later on in the cycle. We had to swap Archbishop of York in between the 2 parts of Henry II, Henry IV rather.
Henry IV Part 2 and Henry V.
Yeah, and then at the very last, unfortunately, we had to swap out Queen Margaret for Richard III. Celine played that role through the first 3 parts of Henry VI, but she wasn't available to do Richard III, so we had another actor who had done an amazing job as well. Yeah, to be able to follow that all the way through, to get a sense of, like, oh, that's that. All right, he's related to that guy. Okay, that's his cousin. That's his brother. Right. Okay, that's and the grandfather. Right. Gotcha. Oh, and that's the right. Okay, I see what you mean. Now I get it. Although it didn't help by the time we got to Richard III that there were 2 Prince Edwards. We was like, which Prince Edward are you in this scene, Carrie? I was, oh, yeah, you're Prince Edward number 1. Okay, now you're Prince Edward number 2, and one of the. And Prince Edward, Prince Edward I is the son of Henry, and Prince Edward II is the son of another Edward. I'm like, God, what the hell? It's like, why does everyone call their sons Edward? What's going on? Crazy. But no, sorry, getting back to your question, what we're going to do from now on, we have Much Ado About Nothing coming up in about 3 weeks. Yay! And as soon as we can,
my favorite. Finally,
cast. Yes, as soon as we can lock down, actually get 100% confirmed cast, because I've got a few casting woes at the moment. But as soon as we can get that sorted, we'll be sorted. Then basically in terms of Shakespeare, we have Much Ado About Nothing at the end of this month, September, and then Julius Caesar at the end of October, and As You Like It at the end of November. But we're also throwing in, because I'm bored and I want to do things every fortnight. But I'm taking it a little bit easier. So after Much Ado, we are doing my rhyming verse adaptation of The Bear by Chekhov, which is just a 3-hander. It's a 40-minute 3-hander. So we're doing that in the middle of October before we get to Julius Caesar. And then after Julius Caesar, between that and As You Like It, we are doing Miss Julie by Strindberg, again in my own adaptation, which again is a 3 actors. It's only about probably an hour and 10, maybe an hour and 15, something like that.
Is it big in Australia, Chekhov? In a theatrical world, in a theater world.
Big-ish. I mean, it's always the standard kind of hits. It's always Uncle Vanya and Cherry Orchard and those big ones, but they're not done regularly, and when they are, it's usually star driven, because I think people have more of a problem with Chekhov than they do with Shakespeare, because at least with Shakespeare you've got the comedies and you get a sense of like rollicking entertainment, whereas Chekhov is generally regarded as being, I'm going to kill myself.
Oh no!
Everything miserable.
No.
Oh, I'm Russian and everything.
Did you see the production with Kate Blanchett and Hugo Weaving from Uncle Vanya?
No, I didn't. I missed that one. I missed it. I've seen.
It was very light, and the way I think Chekhov has to be done.
I know, Cherry Orchard. People are so, the orchard.
Oh
Oh.
my,
It's so funny. It's one of
so
the
funny.
funniest. It is an
Absolutely.
hilarious play. I love
Yes.
Cherry Orchard. Yeah.
Yes.
It's people think, oh, it's a comedy by Chekhov. Oh well, comedy was just the word they used for something that wasn't an alcohol.
No. It's very funny.
No, it's a comedy. It's supposed to be funny. Yeah. No. So we're doing a bit of Chekhov, a bit of Strindberg, and then don't tell anyone, but we're also doing in December. I'm also looking to do a production of Christmas Carol in time for Christmas. So,
Okay.
That is something that is really big in Australia, in Canada, I guess. Like
Carol in December.
Christmas
Yeah.
plays.
That's gonna be original.
Yeah, we don't do that in
Very
Brazil.
different.
No,
yeah.
we don't.
Hey, you should.
But
Start
David,
it.
how
Start the
it
tradition.
it should. It's
I think there is a
I don't
reason
know.
for that. Because Christmas here is like 35 degrees outside.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
Summer,
Australia as well.
just the same. Okay.
Thinking hard.
So
It's the
all
hardest
the
summer.
places are like places with snow,
I'm a
and all
working
the
actor.
sadness and love and everything.
I'm a working actor in Australia. Every Christmas, I'm sitting in front of two fans dressed in a Santa suit in some shopping centre somewhere, thinking, why haven't we adapted the Santa suit to suit summer in
Yeah.
Australia?
Exactly.
Damn.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, it's
But David, a question that I have about the theater in Australia, how is it done? Like, you have the help from the government. How do you get the money to do, especially when you're doing like a classical play like Shakespeare or something? How does it work? Do you have help from the government or for the audience? How does it go?
Well, it's changing rapidly, unfortunately. It's a combination of different things. Some companies are subsidized by the government. Sometimes it's federal government funding. Sometimes it's state government funding. Some of them are subsidized by local councils as well. But there's a certain tier of funded companies. Then you get independent companies that are more or less self-financed. Sometimes they're able to secure corporate sponsorship. Generally, though, that will be in-kind sponsorship. So we need to stock our bar for interval and pre-show, so we get a wine sponsor or a beer sponsor. We get somebody to provide all of our printing, so we can do a run of posters and handbills. That's provided in return for advertising space. Sometimes a person will give some money. Sometimes they'll provide services. Whatever. You get certainly in Melbourne, you have Melbourne Theatre Company. They're the big end of town. They get federal government funding. They get state funding. They get local funding. They get a roster of big corporate sponsors, all the big resources companies and airlines and whatnot, Qantas and so on. They'll sponsor them. But I've spent most of my career in independent theatre, where it's basically just whatever money you've got. Like when I did A Streetcar Named Desire, 6-7 years ago now, it was basically whatever myself and Adam, my co-producer, had in our pockets at the time. And we just begged, borrowing and stealing everything. I mean, we'd borrow some rostra from a mate who ran a school, and we went to the tip. We went to the rubbish tip, to the recycling centre at the rubbish tip. We found our refrigerator in our kitchen unit there. Our costumes were provided through an op shop, a charity op shop. So it was all smell of an oily rag stuff. It was, and that's how a lot of independent theatre gets done. There are some organisations like La Mama here in Melbourne, and there's the Blue Room in Perth, who are subsidised to provide a small cash boost to content creators for an overall season. They'll curate a season. You make an application. I want to do this play. Here are my people. This is the idea. And then they'll say, okay, well, here's $2,000. That's your production budget. and everybody works on a profit share. You spend this on marketing, you spend this on the production, whatever you want to spend it on. And most people are happy. I think a lot of people are happy to work with just that $2,000 or $1,500 if it's a 2-week season. And some of them add their own money to it. Some of them get, some of them are lucky enough to have parents who, pay for them, or they've managed to save their money over 6 months of squirreling away as much as they can. Unfortunately, at the moment, things are changing quite rapidly in Australia. We have a very, very unpleasant fascist government. I don't know if you guys know what that's like.
No, we don't. No. It's cool.
Us?
Yeah.
Cool. Never heard
You're
about
fine. We have money for theater. A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
We're fine.
Yeah.
Fascism. Never heard about it.
No. What is that?
So distant.
Yes.
And basically about 2 years ago, they just absolutely gutted federal funding, and so many small and medium tier companies who had been relying on federal government funding just had to close. They just wound up their affairs and shut their doors forever. The big companies like Melbourne Theatre Company, Sydney Theatre Company, all the sort of the state theatre companies, they were pretty okay, although they're now leaning a bit more heavily towards their corporate sponsors. And not that long ago, less than a year ago, the government actually it's hard to describe. We now no longer have a federal arts funding agency in name. There is no longer a department for the arts. There is, but there isn't.
We know exactly what you mean.
We know exactly the same what happened.
It was rolled into the Department of Transport and Infrastructure without even so much as a name change. So it's not the Department of Transport, Infrastructure and the Arts. It's just the Department for Transport and Infrastructure, and the arts are part of that.
Here we have the department.
Wait. That's new. That's new to me. Like they put the arts within the Department of Transport and Infrastructure.
But here we are connected to tourism department, so it's not the same thing.
You're right. You're right.
Almost the same.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely. You're right. You're right.
Yeah. So
besides that, all this difficulty with the government and where to get money, when you finally get to do your show, people go to see it. You have at least the ticket selling money.
And if you're savvy about your marketing, there's certainly in Melbourne. Melbourne is a city of culture. Melbourne has always had a very healthy and vibrant theatre scene. With Melbourne Theatre Company, what's now called the Malthouse Theatre, which used to be called Playbox. There are a number of independent. I mean, we have like 3 first-tier opera companies in Melbourne. We have, one of the best venues in the country, the Victorian Arts. In fact, we have several really, really good venues. We also have a pretty solid commercial theatre scene. Well, obviously, up until the theatres had to close because of the plague, of course, but we had between the Comedy Theatre, the Princess Theatre, Her Majesty's, the Athenaeum, the Regent. There's like a whole kind of theatre precinct in the city with all these beautiful old jewel box theatres, and they've constantly had shows running through them. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child playing at the Princess. There was everything from the Muriel's Wedding musical and Aladdin and playing at Her Majesty's, and you had Come From Away at the Comedy Theatre, and all these kind of commercial musicals and occasionally plays. We had Ellen Burstyn come over to do a play at the Comedy Theatre at one point, not that long ago. It's a very vibrant scene. Even at the worst of times, there's a lot of people who love going to the theatre in Melbourne, and it's a solid culture. So, if you can let them know that it's on, as long as your show is not the best kept secret in town, if people are aware of it and they want to go and see it, they'll come along. You'll get an audience. We're certainly hoping that once the plague goes away and the theatres reopen, people will want to revitalise that and get back into it and start going to the theatre. We'll see.
That's good, because in Brazil that doesn't happen.
No.
Oh, well, I don't know. From what I know about, I mean, you know the limitations of my knowledge about theatre in Brazil, but from what I can see from the videos that keep getting sent to me by a certain individual who I won't mention by name, but he keeps sending me all these wacky, bloody, crazy, mental, sexually explicit productions that they're doing at Teatro Oficina, and I'm like, what the
But they are like
they
so.
seem to be doing all right for audiences, I can tell you.
They are here, you know. They have like 40 years. They are historical here.
Yeah.
They are very, very important here. But actually, we have like hundreds of theater companies all over the country. But it's very curious because we don't have a national company. We don't have big companies that are supported by the government. We always try to have new kinds of receive money, even from the government, but we don't have a big company, you know. We have, for example, dance companies that are public, but we don't have theater companies. And this is so crazy because we have all kinds of theaters, all kinds of artists, and the culture here is very, very rich. But we don't have this one company, you know, that represents the country or something bigger. But let me ask you something. Do you have a company that only does Shakespeare? Like exclusively?
Well, yes and no. Bell Shakespeare out of Sydney, which I worked with a long time ago. John Bell went in the 60s to the UK, and he worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company during the heyday in the 60s, when it was all like, you know, Judi Dench and Ian McKellen and David Warner and all those sort of legendary kind of 1960s era. And then he came back to Australia, and he became one of the sort of father figures of the Australian theatre, and was responsible for setting up a whole bunch of different companies and a whole bunch of different venues. And then I think in the late 80s, early 90s, he formed the Bell Shakespeare Company, and the brief was to do just Shakespeare. And their brief still is to do mostly Shakespeare, but they do occasionally throw in you know, other classics as well. They've done Goldoni, Servant of Two Masters. They've done I think they've done some Marlowe, but for the most part, probably 80 to 90% of what they do is Shakespeare, and it is about making Shakespeare as accessible as possible and approaching it from a distinctly Australian perspective. And taking it out. They have a really, really, really good education program, and a company of actors that goes around to schools and just is year round, just relentlessly touring and doing shows at schools. They tour. They're a touring company, so they're always traveling around the country with their shows. And 80 to 90% of what they do is Shakespeare. But even that, and they've been going since 91 was their first season, maybe 92. Even they haven't done the complete works yet. They haven't done you know, they probably
But you're getting there with the readings.
Well, absolutely. I will be first across the line, yes. No, but John is obsessed with Shakespeare. He doesn't run the company anymore. He's semi-retired, but his influence is huge. And as a dedicated classical theatre company, it is something of an anomaly on the Australian landscape. All of the big state theatre companies and some of the smaller companies as well will do the occasional bit of classical theatre, the occasional Shakespeare. Melbourne Theatre Company usually does at least one Shakespeare every other year, if not every year, as well as other classics, but they also do new work and new international plays that have been on the West End or Broadway or off Broadway. But Bell Shakespeare out of Sydney, they do. They're a dedicated classical theatre company, and bless them for it.
Yeah, I wish we could have one here, but we are not there yet.
Yes, we are trying.
We are trying.
Absolutely. Keep going, never give up.
We will.
Yeah. So, guys, we have like it's time to say goodbye to David because we have like an
Already?
hour
No.
chat.
It was so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, went very fast.
Don't cry, David. I'll see you a lot this week, right? Because we have rehearsals.
We have indeed, yes.
Uh,
Just got to find ourselves a Claudio now. We've lost our Claudio. I'm like, ow.
Oh my God.
Alexis, who was one of the French actors that was referred to earlier, was going to be doing our Claudio, but he's in Paris working with Peter Brook at the moment. So
Oh, okay.
so it's
Okay.
Okay.
suddenly, yeah, it's like fine as excuses go for pulling out.
Okay, fine.
That'll do.
should
Let you go.
I do a reading playing Claudio and the hero would be like a Brazilian girl that is just waiting for the opportunity to talk shit about my football, or should I go to work with Peter Brook?
Tough
It's
choice.
I don't know.
It's a tough choice.
Impossible choice.
Yes.
I could.
Okay, so I would totally choose you, David.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, liar.
I choose to believe you.
Oh my God! So David, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, David.
Thank you.
being here with us,
Thank
talking
you.
about Australia and how things works in Australia, and there are so many things that are just the same in Brazil.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the audience part is not the same, but we're gonna work on that in Brazil.
Exactly.
Just
We
keep
keep
doing
trying,
your good
yeah.
work in Australia.
Train
And
them up. Train them to be good audiences.
Yeah, we are.
yeah,
That way to go.
For
Trying
years
to
Them
now.
with
that's
Shakespeare.
We are really
Shakespeare
trying.
is nice. Like him.
We have to tell them
We're
that
gonna lock
Shakespeare is
them
amazing.
lock them in the theater. Gonna put them in. It's like you're locked in.
You will watch. You will enjoy.
Stay here. Like it.
Yes.
Flat by the end. So thank you so much, David.
My pleasure.
Obrigada, pessoal, que está aí assistindo, que vai assistir isso depois. Lembrando que depois isso aqui vai para o nosso podcast também. Se você estiver interessado em conhecer mais o trabalho do David e também as leituras das peças históricas que ele dirigiu, de que algumas eu participei, é só você ir no YouTube da International Actors Ensemble, tá tudo lá para você assistir. As próximas peças que ele vai fazer também estarão lá. David, do you want to finish with the phrase in Portuguese that you love?
I think it's a good piece of advice for you guys as you try to plow into the audiences and get them going. Vamos detonar essa porra.
Aê, vamos detonar essa porra.
Let's do it.
So
Esse é o
good.
clássico brasileiro, Sepultura.
Yes.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David.
My pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Tchau, pessoas. Até semana que vem.
Tchau, gente.
Oh.